This is what we need to do. This is going to bring that school to the next level.
That's Thinkering. This Thinkering process is going to be really transformational to all subjects that we're talking about.
The value of the alliance is it's a thinking collective. Now we have a greater understanding amongst everyone. And that's not what's common in schools.
I always tell our students this can set you apart, make you stand out, something to remember you by. It's an opportunity to share. It's win-win all around.
I think the biggest part of what we do are the humans that we work with on the other side of that, right? Really see the human impact, the way that they're interacting and working with their community.
It really does have to flip. You should be able to think about that as your hero's journey, to be able to go, this is how I was able to overcome.
And they really have this drive to want change. And I feel like continuing that mission is really important.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome to Thinkering Minds podcast, where we explore transformative stories in education and mental health. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with founder and CEO of Same Here Global, Same Here Schools. Eric, thanks for joining. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Hey, everyone. My name is Eric Kussin. I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called #Same Here Global. Same Here is an American Sign Language sign. We'll talk more deeply when Jim and I go into it. You and I, we're the same. It's got a global message around normalizing the conversation, making part of our everyday conversation. And then there's a brother-sister for-profit, which may be interesting to talk about, called 5 and 5 Inc. And 5 and 5 stems off of the statistic that gets used way too often in the mental health space, that 1 in 5 people are mentally ill, which creates a binary understanding of mental health. And we want to, since there is a Thinkering collective, it'll land well in this group, that there is a collective when it comes to mental health, way to look at mental health and not looking at it in such a binary system.
Your background is over 20 years in professional sports as an executive. Can you share pivotal moments that really led you to transform from a career there to founding Same Here?
Well, the pivotal moments were getting jumped up and punched in the face by life. NBA league office, Chicago Sky, Phoenix Suns, New Jersey Devils, Florida Panthers, typical corporate ladder, moving from one spot to the next. Chief revenue officer down with the Panthers, which was my last position in sports. 6 months into my tenure there, so it was real early, my brain and my body just gave out on me. I didn't know what it was from. I didn't know if I had a traumatic brain injury or a tumor or something that was, even an aneurysm, right? Like, that's how dysfunctional I felt, that something felt almost like it was exploding in my brain. Came back to New York, where I was told the top doctors were Ivy League trained doctors. And for 2.5 years, I was put on 52 different psychotropic drug combinations, being told I had a chemical imbalance and I needed chemicals to balance out my imbalance. And those chemical imbalances came in the form of depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, ADHD, your typical current medical model that exists in mental health. And so when you're a patient and you're being told that by top doctors, that's what you follow. So it's probably not surprising now looking back on it that I never got better during that 2.5 years. And I remained what I call dysfunctional. I couldn't leave the house. 2.5 years of my life essentially erased. But what it led to eventually was going inpatient, being told my last resort was to have ECT, which is shock therapy, for those who've seen it in the movies, not getting better from that. And then meeting a practitioner who helped me understand that these challenging life events that I'd been through as a child, with my older brother being sick from the time I was 9 years old, he had broken his femur bone, then he had cancer for 5 years and flew out of a Jeep and cracked his head open in another accident, then a relapse to leukemia again after, 10 years after he went into remission, was a septic shock from the chemo treatments, and kidney transplant and coma for 3 months. Just one thing after another, and then I lost 3 of my close friends. Well, that all happened from the ages of 9 until 23, 24. My mental health crash didn't happen until I was 35. Where was the gap in between? And that's where the missing piece was for me, because at 35, my brain stops working. I have a chemical imbalance. So I'm being told the years from 24, 23 until 35, I'm running sales for the Suns, the Devils, and the Panthers. I'm not thinking there's anything wrong. This is where I came to find out that mental health is cumulative and it's a build over time. And there's this thing called chronic stress and trauma. Those can be different things to different people. It's not that you have to have been in a car accident or have lost a brother at a young age for you to have experienced trauma. Trauma is different things to different people. I hope that gives some background in terms of how I got there. I loved sports. I would have stayed in sports my whole career. But when life decides to throw you a curveball, and then you figure out there's a whole other puzzle to figure out here. And the reward that I get by getting in this space is that I get to help people. That's the greatest drug that there is. And that's not a disrespect to my friends who still in sports. This is just something that brings me much more joy on a day-to-day basis.
You've been open about the mental health journey. And I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do is discuss mental health and discuss like healthcare, being a patient, a caregiver, having to be cared for, and the burdens and stresses that come with that. So those like the two things that I think people are just afraid to talk about. And the way you do it is really impressive. So the vision behind the organization, how has it evolved since its inception?
You know what's interesting? Obviously, anything that you do over a number of years, there's evolutions that take place. But the core of our mission has stayed the same, which is from a starting point. And let me give the three messages that are most dominant in the mental health space. They dominate nonprofit websites. They dominate press releases. You're a PR guy. They dominate SEL curriculum. And I think, unfortunately, they move us away from healing as a society. Big picture, right? When you're asking the messaging and how we evolve as a society right now, it's end of 2024 as we're taping this. Maybe you need to cut out the timing. I don't know when you post it, but we have the highest suicide ever in the history of our country. We have the highest overdose ever in the history of our country. So over 50,000 suicides, over 100,000 overdoses. Okay. And if you look at the chart, this is not like a 1-year blip. This has been going up and up and up. We just had the school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. Fourth school shooting in our country this year. Okay. Where do you think school shootings come from? Not trying to disrespect anyone who emphasizes guns and gun control. Whole other topic we can talk about. You cannot shoot up a school when your mental health is in a good place. Mental health is involved when there is school shootings or mass shootings. So we have highest ever, and yet we're doing the same things over and over again. So, okay, what's the messaging where we're doing those same things over and over again is three messages in particular that dominate this space. I kind of teased the first one. They all start with the statistic 1 in 5 people are mentally ill, for which I asked then the rhetorical question or maybe facetious question, what are we telling the other 4 in 5 people, 80% of the population? And I know the answer to that question because I ask it in schools and offices when I go every day. It's people think that they're healthy, fine, normal, and okay. All right, well, if that's our understanding of what our mental health is, that you're either in the category or you're not, you're going to have a hell of a lot of people that are getting sick, which is why you see those numbers going in the place they are. Second thing is all the campaigns are an action word of cessation followed by normalization. So stop, stomp, break, erase the stigma. Okay, well, stigma is not formed by the phone that I'm holding up or this pen in my hand, because those are inanimate objects. They're formed by people. So when your campaigns for normalization are stop the stigma, you've got the affected group of people who are the advocates and their family members saying, you mean people who are the healthy ones need to stop being mean to me. Stop it, break it, erase it. You can't just scream that out in the air and be like, this is a rallying cry. No, it lands on people and it takes this binary topic and moves us further apart. And then the third thing in the space is all the way in which celebrity stories are being shared. It's usually their disorder label and then some form of erratic behavior. Britney Spears is part of the 1 in 5. She's got depression. Lindsay Lohan is part of the 1 in 5. She's got anxiety. Then they link to the Us Weekly and People Magazine article. Britney Spears' depression leads to her shaving her head. Lindsay Lohan's anxiety leads to her dressing like a hot mess. So add these three messages up in the biggest billboards. Again, press releases, websites, what's in SEL programs. It's for 1 in 5 people. Those are the kids that have to go to get the 504 or the IEP, or those are the ones that have to go to the counselors at school. Let's stop stigmatizing that poor group. And if you want to know if you're in that poor group, do you run off the basketball court in panic attacks like Kevin Love? Do you think you could run for president like Kanye West? There's a reason why we have people not going, it applies to all of us. So our mission as an organization and how it's changed, I know I gave you a long answer, short question is, it hasn't changed much because there's so much need to go to the core, which is mental health is a topic for 5 in 5. It lives on a continuum. Every single person is impacted. That continuum, yes, we move up and down throughout the course of our life, but when we look at dysregulation of the nervous system, as opposed to who has a disorder and who doesn't, then we're able to heal in the collective. So what we did was say, how do we get athletes, entertainers saying, same here. I've been through challenging life events just like you have. I'm part of that 5 in 5 group. And then what we'll sure we'll dive more into, bring that idea and that education, that programming into schools, into offices, into sports teams and leagues, into military first responders groups, so that we can start to hold hands and not look at it as who has it, who doesn't.
So Same Here does something unique. It brings together athletes, celebrities, and mental health expert practitioners in a big global alliance. How do these alliances change the conversation in mental health?
So think about this for a second. Obviously, our delivery mechanisms, there's multiple, right? So one, you got the website, and you got SEO and SEM marketing, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. And so the first thing is we want people to see what I call a tapestry or a quilt of many different people from many different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, color they are, what age they are, what gender they are, to say, look at all of us, look how different we look. And same here, we're all on the same team. So there's a visual representation first and foremost. Now, every single person who's featured on our site, whether it's the Celeb Alliance, which is athletes and entertainers, whether it's what you just brought up, doctors and practitioners, the only way people get on our site is not aggregating from other sources. They have to share their own Same Here challenge story of what they went through. That's game changing when patients can come to a site, or let's not even call them patients, everyday people who are just going through something or want to be preventative, and maybe they're not going through something, but they want to learn about it. And they see, wait a second, this world-class doctor, they went through childhood trauma, and that's what's guided them in terms of how that they're providing treatment to folks right now. And holy cow, wait a second, the trauma that they went through is similar to the trauma that NFL lineman went through. That's really interesting. That two very different people. So on the one hand is web and the way that we present ourselves, social and upfront. The other piece is when we get asked by organizations to do collaborations, it's game changing to be able to bring these folks with us in person. And the nice thing is they don't have to do the heavy lifting. They're there to tell that story in a way that is genuine. And we don't want it to be a canned 30-minute speech that they get paid every time to do that same one. We want to tee them up in a way for them to talk about, like, to your point where I appreciate the comment you said that I share my story and it's usually a thing that's uncomfortable for people. I think the magic sauce is that we make uncomfortable topics comfortable for people to share, because we come at it from the lens of things happen to us in life, and those things then impact the way we feel and function because it impacts our health, what goes on in our body. That's not anything for anyone to be ashamed of. You didn't choose for a family member to get sick. You didn't choose to grow up in a single parent household and watch your other friends have both parents. Why then should you be ashamed of how that impacted you? You should be able to talk about that as your hero's journey, to be able to go, this is how I was able to overcome. So that's the value of the alliance. It's a thinking collective, kind of like in a Thinkering, but specifically within mental health. And then the frontward facing way in which we can use stories for normalization through our programming and web and social. That's really the main key.
We often put athletes, celebrities, and our subject matter experts in a category, like a heroic category. And it's really powerful to see those people we put on that pedestal, realizing that it's just like me. That guy who caught the touchdown pass, he doesn't believe in himself any more than I do. He's just on the TV and I'm not. And coming to that understanding is crucial. One of the things you said, Evan had invited me to a Same Here check-in online, and it was really cool because it was awesome seeing so many just enthusiastic people show up. Tons of people. And one thing that you said really stuck with me, and I've said it to like 100 people since then, is that we always talk about things in terms of what's on our plate, how much is on our plate. And it's like, what if the plate's cracked, or what if the plate's got a weak point in it? And it doesn't matter how much or how little's on that plate. If the plate's not working right like it's supposed to, and then that kind of bridges us to the education aspect. You have an initiative called Same Here Schools. It's focused on mental health programs, but in the education setting. When we talk about what's on an educator's plate and how strong is that plate, that's one of the most important things that trickles down to students and their learning journeys. Can you elaborate on the core components of just the initiative and its primary objectives?
Yeah, for sure. So the interesting thing was, the initiative for Same Here as a nonprofit started with this messaging mission vision on normalization. And the first time we ever did programming, we went out to Drexel University. So I'm giving you like deep dive background. There was a woman who was doing a music and mental health event, and I came with Darren Ravel, who was a sports business reporter. It's nice that he's got 2 million followers on Twitter. This young woman was looking for a way to promote and get it out so that for her project for her senior year, she was able to get people there. We had no programming plan whatsoever. Okay. All we did was, I'm going to share my story. Darren is kind of a natural, I guess, if you will, MC. Okay. So he's going to, play traffic cop. And then there were a couple of musicians there. And then off of me sharing and going deep into my story, you saw them going deep into theirs. And the room just opened up. Like, you saw people in the audience raising their hand. Oh my God, I can't believe you shared that. And now keep in mind, this was 2018. So we're talking in the span of how changes happened in mental health. This was a long time ago, even though it's not been many years. And so there was a Dr. Paul Furtaw, Furtaw, who was the head of psychological counseling at Drexel. And he came up to Darren and I after the session. He goes, how often do you guys run these at college university? We're like, what do you mean by these? Like, we've never run something like this. Like, he's like, okay, you need to do more of these. Like, this is needed in this space. So we ended up putting together, before we ever got into K through 12, because of Darren's Twitter following and it's very sports focused, we offered college athletic departments that we would visit 15 college athletic departments with what we called same here sit downs. We would pay for them. We wouldn't make the school pay for them, right? This is at a time when we had to prove the concept. And we would bring these men and women, these athletes with us one at a time, right? But budget's only so much. And so you could apply here. We had 57 schools apply. We picked 15. So 5 in the East Coast, 5 in the Midwest, 5 in the West. And we wanted there to be differentiation between the schools. So there were big schools like USC, Michigan, Indiana, Cornell, Boise State. And then we wanted there to be smaller schools like William and Mary and James Madison and Richmond. And so we did this 15 city tour where I was basically a glorified Uber driver, picking up Hayden Hurst from the NFL and Monty McGee Stafford from the WNBAs. We're flying them in on planes and we're going in. And again, similar from a programming standpoint, I would call it what has now developed into our pillar 1. And I'll take you through the pillars in a second. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew what was needed then was vulnerable story sharing. We have to get everyone in a room knowing we're all going through something. Okay. So that ends up finding success in that the schools are talking with one another. We have content kind of like what you're doing here to be able to post on our socials, albeit modest sized social followings at the time. But people saw it enough and they go, well, that's discussing mental health in a very different way than that's not a clinical psychologist coming in and going, this is what depression is. These 5 symptoms, this list of 20 or more for 2 weeks. They're like, this is being a human and talking about the human experience. So that led to us being able to take, okay, well, we did this in college. Then we ended up creating 5 lanes. So lane 1 is K through 12 that we call senior schools. Lane 2, we created a college lane called senior sit downs. Corporate offices we call senior safe. The reason is because the number one thing that we heard when we were going to offices, I don't feel safe talking about this. I might lose my job or lose a chance at a promotion. Senior service for servicemen and women and first responders, and then senior sports for sports teams and leagues, all the way from youth sports all the way up to pro. So specifically within the first lane that K through 12, senior schools, my father was a principal, okay? And my mother was a language teacher. So I grew up with this understanding as they would come back from school every day and talk with each other. They didn't work at the same school after they first got engaged there. Then they ended up going doing their own thing. I used to hear program, oh my God, we're doing Just Say No to Drugs, but it's one assembly and then it's done, So I saw the struggle that they had in building momentum and concepts and making sure that they are infiltrated throughout a whole school. You don't stop drugs by having a police officer come in and say, this is an amphetamine, up or downer. This is what you don't take. It's bad for you. This is your brain on drugs. Here's a, frying pan with an egg. Don't do this. That doesn't change things. You need to give background and explanation and nuance and talk to people like they're humans. So what we do with senior schools is we built these 5 pillars. Okay. Pillar 1 is normalization of the conversation through vulnerable storytelling and pop culture examples. We do that to show hey, the way that you're currently learning about it, Matthew Perry's an addict that died of a ketamine overdose. No, he's not. Matthew Perry's a guy who grew up with his parents being divorced at 4 months old and his father living all the way in California when he lived in Canada, and his father telling him that drinking was the only way that he helped him feel okay. Well, okay, that then makes sense that he's not just this addict because he's a high swinging guy in Hollywood because he was on a hit show. No, there's a path, there's a story here, right? So we want to take from that first pillar, normalization of the conversation, that it is 5 and 5 and it lives across a continuum. Second pillar is common language. Okay, if we all live on a continuum, what does that continuum look like? So we reached into what's called polyvagal, which is the study of how the nervous system shifts over time, and created our own scale: thriving, gliding, surviving, fluctuating, struggling, sinking, so that people could check in and go, how do I identify where I'm at on there? Okay, there's a legend for the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that come in underneath each one of those places. This is how I can understand myself. This is how I can communicate with others. Okay, great. So that's pillar 2. Pillar 3 is the science of stress and trauma. Why am I moving up and down on that continuum for pillar 2? What's happening inside my body? It's not just a chemical imbalance. Going all the way back to my story from the beginning, it's different. My vagus nerve is losing vagal tone. My HPA axis is on fire, and it's telling my adrenal glands to start producing cortisol. Those are just two of the geeky science explanation pieces of it. But when you learn that the physical body has changed from the challenging life events that you've lived through, now all of a sudden you go, there's a reason why I feel how I feel. I get it. And guess what? I can take agency over that. Before we go into the agency part, which is pillar 5, we do pillar 4, which is, what do we turn to? This would be, I would say, the replacement for just say no to drugs in its right place, amongst not just talking about drugs, but alcohol, gambling, sex, hoarding, vaping, cutting. In my case, I'm raising my hand, working. We use things to avoid the pain that happens for pillar 3 of what's changing in our body. Now talking about pillar 4, either through substances or through behaviors to avoid, to get away from, to not have to deal with. Well, guess what that does over time? That makes those changes in the body get even worse because we're not addressing them. So what's a better way to address them? That's where pillar 5 comes in. It's called STAR exercises. STAR is an acronym: stress and trauma, active release and rewiring, or a gym for the brain. Wow, there's many modalities in a physical gym. If I want to get in good shape, even with cardio machines alone, there's an elliptical, a treadmill, a Stairmaster, a bike, right? There's all these different rowing machines. Why are we told with mental health the gold standard is bed management and talk therapy? Really? That's like going to a gym and seeing only a treadmill. There's so many things that you can do that heal these affected parts of our nervous system and the connection between our brain and our body, and we're not teaching them to people. So that then gets delivered, I'll land the plane on this, in 3 different mechanisms. There's a presentation portion for each pillar, there's a workshop for each pillar, and then there's an implementation session for each pillar. How are we going to bring this back into the classroom? And that's what we've learned is what actually helps schools the most in terms of changing culture and weaving this into their day-to-day. You cannot do it by doing a singular presentation. We did mental health for the year because this guy, Eric, or Chris Herron from the Celtics, came in and told their story. There has to be this ongoing build, and it's got to be part of the fabric that now goes back to your point of the plate. If we get the teachers and the school professionals on board, that they're going through things and their plate is starting to either get soggy, there's too much food on it, or the plate is broken, how do we help you solidify your plate so that your plate is strong for the plate of the kids? Now it's game changing. But that's not the common understanding right now. So that's where our work really lies.
Yeah, I always like the mental health and physical health kind of comparison, because when we see somebody who's, it's about to be the new year, we see somebody who's out of shape, they're at the gym, we think to ourselves, like, they're hitting it up in the new year, like, way to go, person, like, good on you for taking the initiative. But then we don't do the same thing for somebody going through and tackling their mental health challenges, where when you say like, oh yeah, I've been going and seeing this therapist, it's great, I've been taking time to go for walks, and I'm really going into my routines and getting myself organized and happy, and people think like, oh, you really must be going through it. Oh, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with your life?
I'm going to take your analogy, I'm going to add to it, okay, because it's such an important point that you brought up. So let's use the physical gym, for example, because you use the person who's jacked and is in good shape, okay? We applaud when people go to the gym, both the jack guy or gal, and we're like, I want to look like that. That's awesome that they're going. But we also look at the 400-pound person who's going to the gym, and we go, good on that person for getting their butt up and wanting to work and we applaud it. And it's amazing. Now take that to mental health. The equivalent of the 400-pound person on physical is the person who's struggling, okay? So one is, yes, we're damning them alone, like, what's wrong with you for going? But then we're also not telling the person who's doing well, the jack person, that they should still be going to the gym too. So we have, like, I had a teacher write me the other day, and she's like, Eric, I love that you're bringing this up because we've got level 1, 2, and 3 for autism, and our sensory room that we have, only kids who are in level 2 and level 3 get to use it, and level 1 don't, because they do a good job of masking the things that are outwardly symptoms for autism. And so the B don't believe it's needed as much, and we have limited time and resource. And I'm like, all right, you're othering people again. It's exactly what you're doing. That stuff builds in those tier 1 kids, and eventually those are the kids who explode. So it's the gym is something we all need to go to. I know we don't always love to go to it, but we're taught as little kids, hey, jump rope for heart, hoots for heart. We don't want plaque building our arteries. So that stays in our mind, and we go, all right, I haven't gone in 2 weeks. I better get my butt on the treadmill. I better do a walk around the block. We do not do the same thing with mental health. We don't plant that seed early and go, this is needed and a part of, or else this stuff builds and eventually starts to take you down.
It really is the reason why your work's so crucial and important. When we go back to the classroom and we talk about the Same Year Schools program and social emotional development, the sense of connection between teachers, their staff, their peers, and the classroom. Can you just speak to the importance of mental health between all of those different facets and how when one is struggling, it impacts and impairs everybody?
Yeah, so with that question, it's like you can't help but either bring up X and O's, like specific examples, or I use myself as the crash test dummy and the guinea pig, and I don't mind being self-deprecating. So let me do the example first, and then I'll use my own example. So David, who's our Same Year Schools director, when he works with teachers at first, because we always like when we come in to do Same Year Schools, working with the teachers and the school professionals, even if it's an hour before or the day before, we need them learning the concepts before we bring them to the students. And the reason for that is you don't want a kid who's now starting to feel an openness towards vulnerability going up to their trigonometry teacher and saying, my grandmother passed away 2 weeks ago and it's been really difficult on me. And the trigonometry teacher going, that's what you talked to Miss Kathy about, the school psychologist. I'm sorry you're feeling this way, but in our class we do math. You're going to lose that kid right away. So David uses this example and he says, all right, I'm David. I'm a teacher. I'm dressed in a nice button down like you are right now. You're dressed nicer than I am. I just bought this shirt. It's a nice new shirt. And I love my morning coffee. But I got into a fight with my wife before coming in today. So I'm a little jittery. Okay, but I'm driving. I got my coffee in the mug, and I'm excited to at least let my brain clear from that fight I had with my wife as I'm going into the office, and I'm holding the mug. And all of a sudden, some ass, right, comes and just cuts me off. And I spilled that coffee that I was so excited to have that now I only have a little bit of the coffee left. It got on my nice new white shirt. So now I've got a stain all over it. And all I want to do is track down that car, go up to him, give him some gesture that maybe I can't make on this screen. And now that car zooms away. And what do? I get into class. And what am I bringing with me into class? What happened with my wife? What just happened with the person that cut me off? Now, reframe that for a second. That person that cut me off, let's say it was a woman. She might have gotten into a fight with her husband, just like I did with my wife earlier in the day, that morning. She may, because of the fight that she was in, she wasn't drinking coffee. She was so in her own head that she didn't even have time to get her coffee. So she was feeling off because she didn't have her morning coffee because she didn't have time for it. She didn't even realize when she was cutting the lane. And then what David says was hilarious. He goes, she had no idea who David Heimowitz was and still doesn't to this day. Yet I've allowed that to dysregulate me to the point where I'm bringing that into the classroom. That common understanding needs to be understood by everyone. Okay, now let's talk about the behavior of the child in the classroom. I'm someone who in second and third grade was Miss Jordan, third grade was Miss Norton, can't ever forget the names. Miss Jordan's tactic of keeping me under wraps was, Eric's talking too much in class, we're moving his desk next to mine. So she would be facing the class, I would be facing the class at the same time, because it was the only way that, since I'm not in the same place where they are, I can't talk left and talk right. And she's going to see if the other students are reacting, if I'm making a face to make them react. So that's her way of controlling me. Miss Norton, similar but slightly different tactic. I'm going to move Eric's desk all the way to the back of the room so he's far away from everyone else and he can't get involved. Now, why was I talking as a kid? I love Miss Jordan. I love Miss Norton. They were great teachers. I wasn't acting up as a kid because I didn't like them and I wanted to make a ruckus and stop other kids from learning. I was talking so much because my brother was sick, right? I share with you the story. So if my brother was sick that whole time and we're listening to a lesson plan, each of us learn at different speeds. Maybe the lesson plan was boring to me. Maybe the lesson plan was something that I already knew and that wasn't challenging to me. So what is my brain doing at that time? It's going, what's wrong with my brother? When I get home, am I going to hear something catastrophic? Well, your brain doesn't want to stay in that place of pain. So it's going to find other things to do. That's where my behaviors came from. The reason I was talking so much is because it distracted me from, now, we weren't on, in fairness, back then, we didn't understand these things, right? So I can't blame my teachers for having punitively damaged me. We got to make sure that you're going to go to the guidance counselor or the principal's office if you don't change your behavior. But now what we know, how do we create this thread to understand behaviors? Behaviors come from feelings. Feelings come from events. Okay, let's reverse that around. We go through events that change the way that we feel because our nervous system becomes dysregulated, that then lead to, because we're in discomfort, behaviors. So behaviors are signals for us to go all the way back to what events is this child going through? Okay, well, we have a common language to check in. We can understand what those behaviors are, what those feelings are, and ultimately what the events are that came from them. Now we have a greater understanding amongst everyone. And that's not what's common in schools. It's common maybe if a counselor comes in and does a push-in. It's not common in terms of being woven into the fabric of teachers, TAs, students, parents, all understanding one another.
And when you brought up those kind of the butterfly effect, if you will, how somebody's bad day and bad morning, someone else has one. And then while you're talking about it, I had the very obvious realization that, in a classroom, there might be 30 different mornings like that. And then a school teacher's day where she's got 6 classes coming in and out. Okay, that's 200 different variations of that morning and how it all affects everybody.
Well, let's dive into that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got 180, 200, whatever the number is, 6 times 30, 180. So 180 different mornings. So what we do as teachers and as administrators, in order for us to be able to deal with the distractions that come in, we put students into 2 categories: the problem kids and the good kids. Then the problem kids, we don't think about where the behaviors come from. That's problem number 1. And how do we control this? Well, they have to go to the guidance counselor's office. They have to go to the general counselor to get their counseling. That's how we treat that group. Then the other group, they're fine. Well, no, they're not fine. They just have more capacity to be able to hide what they're dealing with from that their brother beat them up last night and they're coming into school with it. And that builds eventually over time. So that's why there's a need for common language in school of showing where we are at on a daily basis and doing check-ins. Because I would have been, after then I got my behaviors under control, 2nd and 3rd grade, I go into 4th grade, my teacher really strict, gets me in line. You wouldn't know, well, I'm doing well in sports. I'm doing well on my tests. So no one knows I'm still struggling with those things. There's no way to check. So now I'm put in the good kid category, right? And that's what we're doing and it's sad. It's because there's not enough resources. I get that. But the answer to not enough resources is keep begging for more resources so we can hire more counselors. The answer is to change the system so that we become a network of peer support specialists all the way from students and teachers all the way on up, and not look at it as the only way we handle this is who are the messed up problem kids that we get more counselors for.
Yeah, it's a cool world where everybody both has the resources and is the resource for other people.
Exactly.
So how are you doing on the same here scale today?
Okay, so look, this is me being very candid. I'm in the fluctuating portion, which is just as the nervous system starts to dysregulate and your sympathetic response starts to become more dominant. And the reason for it is I'm friendly with a hockey player, Robin Leonard, played goalie for Ottawa Senators, Buffalo Sabres. I got to know him when he was with the Islanders. Then he went to the Chicago Blackhawks and then the Vegas Golden Knights. He reached out to us. Cool story. He was diagnosed bipolar, but he saw what we were doing with same here. And he said, I don't want to be known as Robin the bipolar guy. I want to be known as Robin the guy who's been through stuff because he's been through a lot when he grew up in Sweden. And I'm there for everyone. Well, this is public knowledge. I'm not airing his dirty laundry. He put out a tweet after not being public for the last 2 years. That was a 7-thread just dumping of what he's been going through for the last, and he's FaceTimed me a bunch of times. He's not in a great place right now. And when you're a friend of someone, it doesn't matter that he's a professional athlete. He's not playing right now. He's not wearing the hashtag. This is not for business reasons. This is not for clout. This is because I care about the guy. We have to recognize that when people in our lives go through things, that impacts us, especially people who are empaths. I believe everyone has pieces of empathy in them. Yes, there's sociopaths and all that. That's a side story. But most people, when someone in your life is struggling, it impacts you. And so things can be going great with our business and our organization. Things can be going great with the movement. But when other people in my life are struggling in that way, it impacts me. And then I realize that's an indication for me. I need to do the work to start to move more to the left on the scale and get to a better place of regulation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Go back to the classroom setting. I didn't really think about it, but when our outside influences, our friends and family are going through it, we go through it. When we're talking about those 200 stories that a teacher feels a day, just how much weight is that with stories like you were just talking about? How many of those do they encounter on a day in and day out basis? And then students who are trying to learn, how many peers do they have going through it, suffering around them, and how much of that energy is just flowing around the classroom without anyone being really just aware of what it is.
You nailed the word awareness, right? Because I've had pretty interesting, I'd call them, conversations with principals at times. I had one principal who was seeing what we were doing with the scale and said, I love this. This helps so much. But here's my fear, Eric. The more we have kids check in, the more we're going to know that there's more issues. And I don't know that we can handle those issues. And I said, those issues are happening whether you check in with kids or not. This is just giving you some possibility to be able to get in front of it. So the awareness piece, if we can lay the foundation from pillar one that everyone's going through something, then there's a comfort level in that, as opposed to what's happening right now where you feel the energy of other people. Like Tom's like this, Bill's like this, Mary's like this. So we're like, okay, but what's going on with them? Are they the ones who are dealing with? No, like, it's expected when we come to class. We've got a heavy backpack of stuff. Some of us, the backpack gets a little heavier on days. Sometimes it's for months, and sometimes it's not so heavy. But if that realization is there, it's no longer this, what did you hear? What's going on? No, like, how do we help that person? How do we help that person? Because I'm going to be going through it at some point also, and I want someone to be there when I'm going through it.
When we talk about going through, and there's the ultimate hurdle, which is just getting everyone's plate fixed and healthy. When you build a program like that, it's going to come with infinite hurdles under that one you're choosing to take on. What's the hurdles that stand out for you as just things that you had to conquer on your hero's journey and starting same year?
There's obstacles still to this day, right? It's every day when we talk to people. So since you'll probably have a lot of educators that will be part of this network and watch programs like this, the politics at schools, in order to get programs put in place, make corporate America look like a joke, right? Like, corporate America, usually the buck stops with the CEO. It's like, if you get their ear, him or her, you're in a good place. They're going to tell the CFO, this is done. They're going to tell the HR department, this is done. In the school setting, you usually have an internal champion. And now think about where that internal champion can come from. On the SEL side of things, that can come from a school counselor, a school social worker, a principal, an assistant principal, superintendent, an assistant superintendent. Okay. Sometimes even a teacher that's like a big yogi that knows that these things work, right? And doesn't know how to implement programs school-wide, but wants to do something like this. Now, in that model, here's some of the things that happen. The guidance counselor or the school counselors or the whole behavioral health staff love the concept of what we want to do. But the principal was a psychologist in their last life, meaning before they rose to this level, and they have a completely different vision than what their behavioral health staff wants. Okay, so that happens. Let's take it a step further. From a relationship standpoint, the assistant principal knows the person who owns XYZ behavioral health company or curriculum. And so even though it's curriculum in a box and it's not going to be culture changing, that feeds the mouths of the person that they have the relationship with. They're going to keep that one, right? So you got that issue. Then implementation, even if you get over those two hurdles, behavioral health staff, administration is bought in. Well, how do you convince the teachers now that this concept of being one big peer support network, I forget the phrase you used, but I love it. I want to take it where the solution is you. So it was something about like, you're the solution and the solution is also, do you remember what you said?
Yeah, it was, you're both the,
I'm writing this down as you said.
A genius for a moment there. Let's see. It was, you're both the support and getting support, right?
Yeah, you're both getting and giving.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll come back to you, but
something like
to that. You're both the support network and receiving support at the same time. And that's where the real transformational change needs to happen. Obviously, it was incumbent upon us with our tools, with our app, to build something that is really simple for teachers to use. Okay, then you get into things like technology. You got to do single sign-on so that the teachers don't have to put in passwords for the kids. That's not cheap to do. All right, so then you get that in. Okay, well, you want it to be an easy check-in where they click one button, they can check in with everyone in the class at the same time. Push notification comes to them. Okay, well then now they're asking, who's going to notice trends over time? Yeah, the teachers want to be checking in on them, but I don't want to be responsible as a teacher if a kid's checking in a place. So then we got to create alerts. And how do those alerts go to the behavioral health staff? And then the behavioral health staff goes, we already have a lot on our plate with the kids who are considered the problem kids. When you're starting to figure out who these other kids are, okay, this is where STAR exercises come in. This is where we could be that peer support network with each other. It doesn't need to be that it's a crisis situation per se. How do we get in front of these things, right? So it's a lot of education to help people see that the system needs to change. But when the big picture clicks, it's beautiful when you get administrators and teachers together that go, this is what we need to do. This is going to bring that school to the next level. So you work on it, you get there, but it's not an overnight thing. And hopefully some of those challenges were not surprising to you, but at the same time, things will eventually be able to get over even more easily as we go on.
So we get past those challenges and we finally have the students in the classroom logging in and charting their journey on the same here scale. What's that first change that's going to happen in the classroom? What's the first change that they're going to see?
Yeah, so the first change is, so one of the features within the scale is that you get an aggregate view of how everyone else is doing without individual answers. So what do I mean by that? The teacher sees every student's individual answer, but the students see, let's say there's 30 kids in the class, they're going to see 29 other check-ins without them being specific to any one student. What do we hear in this space all the time? It's okay not to be okay. When I hear that phrase, I say it's a beautiful phrase. There's two issues with it. One, there's no teeth behind it. What do you mean it's okay not to be okay? Where's the proof of that? So that's problem number one. And in solving that problem number one, well, there's teeth behind it when you see other people are doing something other than other than thriving. So again, you're the kid who came in and was crying over the bowl of Cheerios that day, early that morning, and you see everyone else, they look like they're perfect because they're taking notes. Meanwhile, they're doodling and they have stuff going on in their head also. So it's permission giving to all the other kids to see that not every kid in the class is thriving, and then there's me over here. That's how most kids think when they come into class and they look around. The other thing is that there's a comma after that phrase, it's okay not to be okay. And the answer is sometimes. Because when you start to get kids checking in daily and seeing a continuum, that's neuroprotective in and of itself. Because instead of them going, I'm Jim, the messed up kid, because I'm messed up, you now start seeing it as, I'm Jim, who's dealing with my parents fighting. That's why I'm at this place on the scale. I'm not this thing called messed up. I'm this thing called going through something. And I can get to a better place where I'm not always the messed up kid. And growing up better than, as well, I should say, as I do, because growing up in a similar era, you grow up and all of a sudden, police come to the guidance counselor's office. That kid is branded as the problem kid. I'm sure at this age, you go back on Facebook and you see those kids who were called out during that class, and your mind puts them in the same category that it did when you were in high school or in junior high school. That's human nature, the bucketing. We gotta get away from that. Okay, well, that kid went to guidance. Guess what? This other kid who's next to me is probably somewhere to the right on that scale. They didn't go to the guidance counselor's office, but they started doing STAR exercises in class because they were dealing with something also. That's the norm. So when you ask where does it go, that's where it goes. It goes towards using the tools to reinforce the concept that everyone's going through something so that it's not this binary system of who has and who doesn't. Now behaviors improve because you're not acting out thinking you're the only one and caught in your own head. You're looking to your left, looking to your right, going, who can help me? And okay, teacher, by the way, the reason I'm acting out is because to signal to you, help me find some things that are going to help me get to a better spot right now.
What is, I imagine with the app, you get a lot of powerful data. What's the process at looking at that? And how do you use that to inform mental health models back in the classroom?
It's so interesting because it's so early on in the process, right? And I love that your mind is going there. I could say this, the idea of even taking a look at how you're so the app itself on the frontward facing side, before we talk about the app data in the back end, you can see trends in the frontward facing side. You see a chart that changes and you can look back and go 3 weeks ago when I was struggling then or sinking then, what did I do? What exercises did I do? What was going on in my life that got me back higher? Maybe I could do those same things right now. Then it shows trends in terms of just like snapshot trends, average weekly score, average monthly score from 1 week to the next in terms of the change. But the data, so schools that are using our app are going, this is more than we ever thought we'd ever have. That's before we ever even dive into the back end data And so who we're talking to, so all right, a partner of ours is a guy named Dr. Lane Wakefield, who's a PhD at Baylor. I knew him through the sports world, right? So you go to where your current connections are. He's a data scientist guy. And so he's been slicing and dicing our data and going back to the schools. We're doing it for free right now because, it's the right thing to do, albeit he's donating his time, right? I don't know that that's sustainable forever as the number of schools we work with continue to grow. But here's a takeaway that he realized in and of itself last year with the schools we work for. The students that track their scale more move more on average to the left over the course of a year than the students who track less. Just the mere tracking alone gets you to a better place. Now, doesn't that make sense? If we are trying to lose weight and you step on the scale more often, you're going to hold yourself accountable and to do the things because you want to get better. You want to lose that weight. Same thing when you're checking in, you're aware and you go, what do I need to do to get better, right? But then once you dive even deeper into it, we're starting to look at things like, okay, there's 3 different SEL programs in school. Which ones are we seeing the greatest movement to the left on? There's different classrooms, okay, who are implementing different types of programs. One is related to, their English course. One is related to their social studies course. When kids are coming in prior to vacation, are we seeing with 5th grade boys that there's more of a dip to the right because as vacations are coming up, 5th grade boys don't want to spend time with their families over a week, whereas 5th grade girls do. And then the flip side happens when they come back from the vacation. 5th grade boys are zooming, they're moving to the left on the scale and they're much better spot. And 5th grade girls, you're starting to see them dip because they missed the time with their family, right? Things like that, and then we'll be able to attribute it to all other things. When we get kids who are going to PE classes more often, are we seeing better movement to the left? Think of the scale as a linear plane that you're able to make movements positive and negative on. You don't want to do it in the numerics forward facing for the kids, because if you do it in numerics, then the kids start to grade their own health and go, I'm a 0 out of 6. I'm a loser. I'm a 6 out of 6. I'm amazing. Not how we should be looking at mental health. That's why we leave it as thriving through sinking. And so that there's terminology and that all the words are ing words, meaning that you're moving in those places. You're not depressed, ED, and you're stuck as the depressed person. So ing words. And then what we do on the back end is we do assign that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That enables us to look at it and see the trending and go, this is informing us of what is working and moving us a positive direction, what's not.
What does a good partner look like to you?
Okay, so when we go and we do the 5 pillars and then we do presentation, workshop, the third piece is implementation session for each pillar. I love partners that think about how do we take social emotional concepts and not just keep it in the bucket of how Eric and Seen here in his organization present it, but how do we actually then infiltrate it into the curriculum in the school, okay? And when I say curriculum, I'm not saying cookie cutter curriculum, like this is what it looks like, this is whatever it does. So here's an example. What if there's a group that's great in literature and now Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye, and we look at his journey and his evolution throughout the course of the book, and we're doing group activities to check in where he would have been at on the scale at different points as he's going through his journey. That's the type of partnerships that we need. How do we bring it into PE classes and see that when we're in a better place on the scale, we see better performances on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever it is, right? So to your point about social emotional being the plate, okay, within the plate, we could start to see then, how do we bring that plate into more places in school, subject matter wise, and what's leading to better outcomes and better performance? That to me is where I see partnerships happen, in the greatest scale.
It was your point on the plate. I just stole that from you. So
it's everyone's plan.
Take genius when I see
it.
It
works, it works. People should use it.
Exactly. So looking ahead, what's the next 5-10 years look like for Same here in the movement?
So we want there to be a continuum of care with common language. Right now, the current mental health system, not SEL system, is I don't do anything about myself. I then start to feel sick. I go to either my general care practitioner or a psychologist. They diagnose me with some kind of label, depression, anxiety, PTSD. In that appointment, if it's a general care practitioner, they're able to prescribe me a medication, first line SSRI, Zoloft, Xyl, Lexapro, Prozac. Okay. Then they say, go to the psychologist if I haven't gone on my own, have a talk this out. Or they say, I'm comfortable prescribing you this first line medication, but go to a psychiatrist in addition to the psychologist so that the psychiatrist can go deeper into what medications you need. Okay, well, then what happens from there? I'm not feeling great. Now, all of a sudden, I don't know where to go. Do I go to a hospital? Do I go to urgent care center? Do I go to a residential treatment program? Okay. Then there's these things called PHPs, which this is not the order of how they take place, but the reality is there is no order. Okay. PHP is a partial hospitalization program. There's an intensive outpatient program. Like, the number of options for what you can do are all over the place and fragmented and bifurcated. So our vision is we are educating schools, students, and teachers. We're educating offices, managers, and employees. We're explaining to them how that mental health lives on a continuum, what the scale looks like, and what exercise they can do. Wait, and now we're starting to form partnerships with University of Central Florida Behavioral Health. That's a hospital system. Now, wait, that's part of a much larger hospital system with hundreds of hospitals. So when we get that pilot done, we can have this in hospitals. Wait a second. One of our partners in what we're doing with Seen here at 5 and 5 Inc. is regional psychiatry. I'm a part owner in an MSO of regional psychiatry. I can't be a part owner in the actual clinic, but of the MSO is what they call it. It's more of an umbrella ownership because I'm not a doctor. Well, what are we doing in regional psychiatry, which is the clinic? Teaching the scale concepts, teaching the STAR concepts. Their therapists, their coaches are all implementing those concepts when people are coming in. Now, compare that to what I just shared, what the current model is. I'm not doing well. I understand it's because I'm moving somewhere on that continuum. My general care practitioner knows it. My psychologist, when I go to the clinic, knows it. The hospital knows it. They understand the same language of where I've been moving and have the same exercises. Yes, I'm not taking away meds. Meds may be a part of it to help me to try to stabilize so that I can do the work with the exercise to get to a better place. But if we stay in this model of talk therapy and med management for the affected people waiting till they're sick, these numbers of suicide, overdose, and shootings, they're going to continue to go up. Homelessness continue to go up. We're staring down the barrel of a tsunami coming at us of mental health outcomes, and we're not changing anything. So when you ask where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years, hopefully that center point, not just in schools, but how schools connect with all these other areas where help can be found, and we're providing that common language and those common tools to that.
One of the big things that always gets touched on in my conversations with educators is technology in the classroom and how it plays a role in mental health. Our iPad kids today are just attached and have to be connected. It's like ironic in a fun, playful way to me that one of the best solutions for tracking and moving mental health is using technology in an app. So can you just speak to kind of what you've seen, the evolution of technology in a classroom and how that plays into the mental health for the educator and the student?
Yeah. Look, technology as a whole, from when we grew up, and it wasn't as, I remember, if anyone remembers what did they call those discs? They were like this big. They looked like a record.
Laser disc.
Okay. I think that was the extent of the technology that we had back in the day. So there's a part of technology that is addictive. Okay. And it plays on the same fight flight system, sympathetic nervous system response. When we're looking at something, we're going next. Our attention span is lower. What that's doing is it's raising sympathetic response, and we're becoming more and more dysregulated. Okay. And I didn't know if you were going this place with this question, which is the interesting thing is we're a mental health organization, and we're using a technology where someone's still on their phone or in their Chromebook. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Dr. Rose on our board, he says something which is really interesting. He goes, when I want kids to talk to me, if I want to know what's actually going on in their head, I want to use the phone because I see these kids posting stuff on social media that I'm like, there's no way in hell you'd be saying that to me in my face directly. Now, how do you harness that in a way that gets them to open up? And the reality is we need common language. Why do we need common language as a starting point? Because if I ask you, Jim, how are you? You're going to respond to me and go, okay, fine, Matt. Well, now if you're given choices to choose from, that's the starting point to a conversation. And then visually our eyes look at that plane and go, I'm a little to the left, I'm a little to the right, and then an explanation for. So we're using the technology as this is where they're comfortable, but at least we're not giving them like update, new thing, and it's feeding that rewards dopamine. I was going to say dopaminergic. I forget the exact terminology for it, but the dopamine system of the next thing. Instead, in essence, is journaling, right? And it's getting people to think about why do I feel how I feel right now, and how do I express that either for myself and how I self-record it, or for the person who's checking in with me. That technology, I think, is helpful in the overall, as opposed to the technology that we're seeing on social and what's fed to us in terms of algorithms. And now, if you want to ask me, where I also think your question was going, is how does it interact with other apps that are in the classroom? I'm a big fan of other apps and technologies that are getting implemented in the classroom. I think our kids are a little smarter than we were in terms of, like, remember my friend going, he had a 2-month-old at the time. No, it had to be older. It was like 5 months old. I'm exaggerating because this is like years ago when like touchscreen technology was first coming out. But I remember he was like, my kid always sees me and I'm holding him and I've got my iPad. And the first time he took his kid on his lap and he was at his laptop computer and he's typing, and his son is like touching the screen, trying to move the screen, and it wasn't moving. And his son starts crying because it's not moving because he didn't have a touchscreen computer on the laptop. So I share all that to say it's not necessarily a bad thing that their heads are in technology. It's a bad thing when the technology's main focus is to feed us content that keeps us hooked and feed us the content that is the slot machine system that has been built on social. I think other things are very productive when it comes to technology, and let these kids who are comfortable using something that we weren't comfortable using advance their learning in a way that we had to do the laser discs with.
Yeah, I remember going from laser discs to like the mini discs to MP3 players. Life life has been wild.
Yeah.
When we talk about educators and administrators who are listening and have picked up on, well, this is important to me, I need to implement this in my classroom. What's the next step for them to get involved?
Look, I mean, I'm in the front lines of this just because I have to be. So I'll put it out there because I'm pretty transparent about it. I have not taken investors in our app or our technology or the for-profit piece of our business strictly because I don't want to be influenced by money. And I don't want to be influenced by people with money saying the return needs to be this. So while it drives me, all over the place, I'm trying to use politically correct terms. Email, eric@samehereglobal.org. Our social channels, which are on the bottom of the screen here, @samehere_global. It's going to be me, and then I'll connect you with some of the members of our team. But like, I do a lot of hand holding. I'm on the phone till probably not the best when you are a workaholic, till all hours of the night. But I'm doing that because it's the right thing to do by people right now, and I want to stay involved. And then eventually, as we grow, build in staff, and the people that we have on our team are just like you and Evan have a synergy with each other. Yet you have a rule of no fill in the blank, type of people. We want good, hardworking people who want to change the world, and that impact is more important than compensation. Not to say compensation is not important, but so the next step is we help you share with us what you're doing with your SEL already. And the answer may be nothing. And okay, cool. We've got our 5 pillars. We could start on pillar 1. The answer may be, Eric, we kind of are doing this. And then I could look at it and, okay, well, you've already kind of doing the versions of what's happening in pillars 1, 3, and 5. So let's do 2 and 4. And oh, by the way, those 5 pillars, that's just the foundational work. I'm not even talking about power of vulnerability, current drug trends, first-person suicide prevention program through our Lifesaver. Like, there's so many other things that we can do, but we got to get the basics down. And where do we see gaps, and how can we help fill them in?
It's important for everybody, not just in the classroom, to take a part in this journey of normalizing mental health. What's the one thing that we can just all do every day, that little thing that we can all do that takes no effort to contribute to the mission?
Yeah, to contribute to the mission from a no effort perspective is the number one question that I get. So it's a different question than yours, but then it's going to pertain to your question. Number one question I get when I'm done presenting, doesn't matter what the topic is, my friend is going through something and I can't get them to open up. How do I get them to open up? What question do I ask? And I always say the best way to get other people to open up is for you to share what you're going through. Okay. And you don't have to get so deep. But when you see other people out there, your vulnerability leads to a safe space being created where you're now allowing that person to step into that space and share with you. I want parents to know this because parents don't realize this. Parents are always, and my parents are the same way, they're trying to protect us from the risk and the threat that's out there because that's what parents do. But if a parent says to you, wow, the last couple of days at work has been really challenging to me, and I don't have the best relationship with my boss, guess what that allows a kid to do? To say, Mom, things haven't been great in classes the last couple of days. There's a student who's not been great. That's a much easier way to get your child to open up than to say, how was class today? What happened? You never tell me what happens in class. Okay, well, that's why they're not telling you, because you're not creating that space to allow them to open up. So what allows the collective to get better is when we share openly what we're going through, people want to step into that space and the collective grows from there where there's greater vulnerability.
Yeah, I think I can follow suit with that and take your advice and share that today I am surviving. I'm trying to get through this cold Kentucky winter on the homestead that I'm not prepared for as a Georgia boy, and make sure that my animals are safe, secure, healthy, and happy while being totally inexperienced to do so. So there's a lot of mental
Yeah,
weight
but what you just shared,
there.
I so appreciate you sharing. And sorry, I feel bad that I didn't ask you back. I went on such a tangent when you asked me where I was at the scale that I should have asked you. Is look how real you're being, right? Like someone else would look at that and go, Jim, that's part of your everyday is taking care of your animals. Okay, well, when the weather changes and now I've got other lives that rely on me, that weighs heavily on me. That needs to be shared with people, okay? Because if not, then we go into, well, I'm the person who's, part of the Thinkering Collective, and so I've got a podcast to do today, and that's the most important thing to me. No, these other things are weighing on you also. Multiple things can be true at the same time. So when you share that, it goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. We, that's part of the journey, I think, is us all becoming more comfortable in our own skin so we can help others do the same thing. Eric, we appreciate you sharing your insights, the impactful work from Same Here Global, Same Here Schools. Before we conclude, do you just want to run down the little rabbit hole of how people can get a hold of you and follow your initiatives?
Yeah, for sure. The social media channel we're most active on is at @SameHere_global on Instagram. It's the same handle for Twitter. If you're a LinkedIn person, we have a Same Here LinkedIn. I'm pretty active though personally, so it's Eric Kussin, Kussin, if you want to DM me there. Our website is samehereglobal.org. Now we're launching a 5 and 5 Inc. Okay. So the nice thing is you'll be able to see the tools, right? Like keep in mind, I launched this as a nonprofit and then was kind of told by the powers that be that are out there, you need to build a for-profit brother sister next to it so that you can contribute to what you're doing on the nonprofit side of things with some of the money that you're making. If you're not taking investors, get solid here. And then this is allowing you to do more of that. You guys are going to be doing stuff with grants and things like that. So you'll start to see more of us promoting the not just it being buried on a nonprofit page. But yeah, those are the main places to come and find us.
Excellent. We appreciate your time and dedication in transforming mental health for, just classrooms and all of us. It's something that it's the unappreciated hero's role that we all need, but don't know we all need it. In closing, I want to land the plane and just say to our audience, thank you for joining. Until next time, keep learning, exploring, and go to samehereglobal.org. Take a look at the Same Here scale. Figure out where are you at today. Take some time to think on that and keep thinking.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Love the term thinkering, and we'll definitely use it in my classroom. The kids will love it.
This is where we can be that peer support network with each other. When the big picture clicks, it's beautiful when you get administrators and teachers together.
You can't be a leader of other people if you can't first lead yourself, right?
Helps the educator have a very clear and structured framework.
Becomes this real community hub. If you're a great educator, you're looking for the most powerful moment. Can we inspire kids to believe that the world needs who they were made to be?
I hope you guys continue to uphold that legacy and continue, finding kids like you.